Have you ever had someone ask, "So what are you doing for your birthday?" and you genuinely didn't have an answer? Maybe your birthday arrives, your phone fills with messages, people wish you well, and yet your day looks almost exactly the same as any other Tuesday. You go to work, you make coffee, you answer emails. If nobody reminded you, you might barely think about it at all. And if that sounds familiar, here's something interesting. Most people assume birthdays are supposed to feel special. They're supposed to be celebrated, anticipated, and remembered. But for some people, birthdays carry surprisingly little emotional weight. Today, we're going to explore the psychology of people who treat their birthday like a normal day. Not because they're unhappy, not because they dislike themselves, but because their relationship with attention, identity, expectations, and time may be very different from what most people assume. One of the first things psychologists notice is that people assign meaning to events differently. The event itself matters less than the story attached to it. For one person, a birthday represents celebration, connection, and appreciation. For another, it's simply a date on a calendar, 24 hours that happen to mark another year of life. If you tend to treat your birthday like a normal day, you may have noticed something curious. The excitement other people seem to feel often feels slightly confusing to you. You appreciate the kindness, you appreciate the messages, but internally, there may be a small voice asking, "Why is everyone making such a big deal about this?" That reaction often comes from a personality pattern psychologists sometimes call low self-focus. This doesn't mean low self-esteem. Those are very different things. Low self-focus simply means your attention naturally points outward more than inward. You spend less time thinking about yourself as the center of events. As a result, occasions specifically designed to spotlight you can feel slightly unnatural. You might even feel more comfortable celebrating someone else's birthday than your own. Interestingly, research on personality suggests that people who score higher in traits like humility and introversion often experience public attention differently. Attention is not automatically rewarding. In fact, too much attention can create mild discomfort. Imagine sitting at a restaurant while staff members suddenly gather around your table singing. Some people love that moment. Others spend the entire song wishing it would end. Not because they are miserable, not because they dislike birthdays. They simply don't enjoy being the focus of collective attention. Another reason some people treat birthdays casually is that they think about time differently. Many people view birthdays as milestones. You may view them as checkpoints. There's a subtle difference. A milestone feels emotionally significant. A checkpoint feels informational. You notice your age. You acknowledge another year has passed. Then you continue with your day. In your mind, growth doesn't happen once a year. It happens gradually. A random afternoon in March might teach you more about yourself than your birthday ever does. A difficult conversation in August might change your life more than turning another year older. As a result, the birthday itself doesn't feel like the primary event. It's simply one marker among thousands. There's also an interesting connection between expectations and enjoyment. Psychologists have long known that expectations shape emotional experiences. The more pressure attached to an event, the more opportunities exist for disappointment. Some people learn this early. Maybe they had birthdays that didn't live up to expectations. Maybe plans fell through. Maybe important people forgot. Maybe the day never felt as magical as everyone said it should. Over time, the brain adapts. It quietly lowers expectations. And eventually, birthdays become easier when they're treated like ordinary days rather than emotionally loaded occasions. What's fascinating is that this adaptation often happens without conscious awareness. You don't necessarily decide to stop caring. You simply stop building large expectations around the day. And in many cases, that actually creates more peace. Now, here's a question. Have you ever reached the end of your birthday and realized you enjoyed a simple conversation, a quiet dinner, or an ordinary evening more than any elaborate celebration? If so, you're experiencing something many people never quite put into words. For some personalities, meaning comes from authenticity rather than ceremony. The event itself matters less than whether the experience feels genuine. You don't necessarily want a bigger celebration. You want a real one, even if that means sitting with one close friend instead of attending a party filled with dozens of people. Another psychological factor involves identity. Some people strongly connect their sense of self to life milestones. Others define themselves through ongoing values and habits. If you belong to the second group, Birthdays may simply feel less relevant. Your identity isn't based on being a certain age. It's based on how you spend your days, the choices you make, the relationships you maintain, the person you're gradually becoming. From that perspective, the calendar has limited power. And perhaps that's why some people can forget their own birthday is approaching until someone else mentions it. Their attention is focused on living life rather than measuring it. Of course, none of this means that treating your birthday like a normal day is somehow better. And it certainly doesn't mean people who love birthdays are doing something wrong. Psychology is rarely about right or wrong. It's about understanding different ways human minds create meaning. Some people feel deeply energized by celebration. Others feel most comfortable when life remains steady and familiar. Both experiences are perfectly human. And perhaps the most important insight is this: if your birthday feels like a normal day, that doesn't necessarily mean the day lacks meaning. It may simply mean the meaning exists in a quieter form. It's in the friend who remembers to call, the message that arrives unexpectedly, the cup of coffee you drink while reflecting on where you've been and where you're going. Not every meaningful experience announces itself with candles, parties, or excitement. Sometimes it arrives quietly. And for people who treat their birthday like any other day, that quietness may be exactly what makes the day feel right.